In honor of Chanuka and our ongoing studies of Sefer Melachim Alef, let's turn to the days of Chanuka, of the first Chanukat HaBayit. It's Melachim Alef, Book of Kings 1, chapter 8. And what we're going to do, just to give you a roadmap of what I intend to do today, is hopefully something relatively simple. Hope I don't eat my words. Instead of learning linear through every single pasuk in chapter 8, which is rather long and we cannot do in one sitting, even if we tried, we're going to learn the beginning of chapter 8. Then there's going to be a speech. We're going to skip basically most of the speech. We'll come back to it. And then we're going to come to the latter psukim that append the speech. And we'll see that those elements that bound Parak Chet, chapter 8, will give us a good frame for understanding aspects of Chanuka, the Chanukat HaBayit. Chanuka, the word Chanuka means to dedicate something, to inaugurate, really to dedicate it. Milashon chinuch, like education, the act of chinuch, of education itself, the training of something for it to be able to be serving a function. And how is it trained, in quotation marks? Not by education passive in a classroom, but by already engaging in the activities, like a tutelage, right? So a mentoring almost, the chinuch. So that's the Chanuka of Chanukat HaMikdash. That's what's going on. There was a Chanukat HaMishkan. We'll look at that today and do a little compare and contrast, and hopefully tease out some really important lessons for us now and during Chanuka, and even beyond Chanuka, and our understanding maybe a little bit about the sense of continuity that we ought to have about our own Miktashei Ma'at, our Bate Knesset that we have, our shuls, which are, according to Chazal, referred to as Miktashei Ma'at. So again, chapter 8, verse 1, I'm jumping right in. I know full well we didn't learn every pasuk in chapter 7. We're going to come back to the part that we skipped about the palace of Shlomo, because it's going to come up again in chapter 10. We're going to dial back and see that as a unit, and then I'll explain why I skipped it when I skipped it. Chapter 8, verse 1. Az yakhel Shlomo et ziknei Yisrael et kol rashi hamatot nisiya avot livnei Yisrael al melech Shlomo Yerushalayim la'alot et Aron brit Hashem me'ir David hitzion. Many problems in this pasuk alone. I'm skipping almost all of them. The main point is Shlomo gathered the leadership in order to bring the Aron Kodesh up, the Aron Brit Hashem, the Ark of the Covenant of Hashem, from the city of David, which is called here Tzion. That's a problem. And they brought it up to Yerushalayim. Gemaras, Midrashim, skip, all of that. We're going to come back to it when we talk about the depths of the speech that Shlomo HaMelech delivers. We won't go to it now, but I'm bookmarking. We have to come back to it. Pasuk Bet, the beginning of the Haftorah on Sukkot, the second day. Vayikahalu el HaMelech Shlomo kol ish Yisrael b'yerach ha'itanim b'chag hu hachodesh hashvi. Shlomo gathers all of the Jewish people in the month, the mighty month. Chag is a reference to Sukkot. It's the 7th month. That's what we call Tishrei. Vayavo kol ziknei Yisrael vayis'u HaKohanim et HaAron. The elders came and the Kohanim carried the Aaron. They brought it up. Vayalu et Aaron Hashem et Ol Moed vet kol klei HaKodesh asher ba'ohel vayalu otam HaKohanim va'aleviim. We're learning here that the Aaron Hashem and the Ol Moed, that was left of it apparently from the time of the Mishkan. Or is this the Ohel Moed, means the Ohel that the Aron Kodesh was in Ir David? Very strange. Again, we have to come back to this. Tzion was Ir David. I thought Tzion is the HaBayit itself. Was Tzion in one place and then it moved? A hint over there, but we'll see. So they bring it up. Vayalu otam HaKohanim v'Alevim. The Kohanim and Levim carry it along with all of the vessels. V'hamelech Shlomo v'chol adat Yisrael hano'adim alav. No'adim, milashon moed. All the people who are appointed, who are there, designated, meeting with him, in other words, at this time, right? So, Hano'adim alav, ito lifnei ha'aron, mizabchin son uvakar, asholi sefru v'limenu mirov. Many offerings are offered, so many that you can't even count, beyond count, as they're going up. Vayaviu ha'kohanim, et Aron brit Hashem el mekomo el dvir habayit, El Kodesh HaKodashim El Toch Kanfei HaKruvim. The Kohanim bring the Aron Brit Hashem into its place in the Dvir HaBayit. Again, is that the lintel they cross over is like the doorway, or is it the Dvir is the house itself, or is it the Kodesh HaKodashim? It's called El Dvir HaBayit, to the Kodesh HaKodashim. El Tachat Kanfei HaKruvim, to be under the Kanfei HaKruvim. Which Kanfei HaKruvim? The ones that are on the floor. Ki HaKruvim porsim knafaim el makoma Aron, because the Kruvim are spreading out their wings to the place where the Aron is. Vayasoku milashon sukkah. Vayasoku HaKruvim al ha'aron va'al badav milamala. Vayasoku sukkah. It's a canopy. They're on top. It's above, right? It's somehow leaning over. And I'll throw in here also for good measure that we're saying these words. The words Devir HaBayit. It's in Al Hanisim. Every day when we recite in the Amidah, the tefillah of Al Hanisim that's added into the Amidah, V'achar kein ba'u vanecha lidvir beitecha. They came lidvir beitecha. Where's the expression dvir beitecha from? In Al Hanisim? Right here. This section of Sefer Melachim Alef. Understand? Time you get to Chanuka, there's no biblical book. So where are they getting it from? They're taking the psukim from this section. Ki HaKruvim porsim. I read that already. Sorry. Vayarichu abadim vayirau rashi abadim min hakodesh al pnei hadvir v'lo yirau achutza yusham ad hayom hazeh. So the staves that are in it are drawn out. They're pulled out so that they are sort of protruding into the parochet of the Kodesh HaKodashim, but they're not seen outside. It's covered. Yeah. Shelly, you're asking about is it already in Jerusalem from David? It is in Jerusalem. It's in Jerusalem means in the Ir David of Yerushalayim. It's not in the spot while they were building it. It wasn't on the spot, on the site of HaBayit in the Kodesh HaKodashim. There wasn't none yet. It wasn't built yet. Yeah. So there was already Mizbeach previously in Goran Ravna, and David did bring the Aron Kodesh up to Yerushalayim, but obviously it wasn't in the spot where the building was because they had to build the building. So did they move it out temporarily, or when it came to Yerushalayim, does it actually mean they put it in Ir David and not in the place per se of the Kodesh HaKodashim or earlier on? Not entirely clear. If you look back in, I don't go off topic, but you can look it up in chapter 6 when they bring it up. So it says that they had an altar there, etc., and they brought it up to Ir David. It's in verse 12 there, chapter 6, verse 12 in Shmuel Bet is where it mentions it, and it mentions again in verse 16. Again, if you look at in chapter 6, you have that in those psukim, and then again in verse 17, they brought the Aron Hashem, they put it in its place in the Ohel, which David had made there, and there's an altar there. That's not the Goran Ravna yet. That's not where he's going to buy the spot of the HaBayit, which is just up the hill from Ir David. That comes in chapter 24. This is that they built a tent. I was just making the point that if you look in our section, back to chapter 8 in Melachim Alef, it mentions specifically, they brought up the Ohel Moed. Well, Ohel Moed means the tent of the meeting. The Mishkan? Thought the Mishkan was destroyed basically in Shiloh. Is it the walls? They still had the boards, the krashim. Some were in the storehouse. They're bringing that up. Or is the words Ohel Moed mean the tent of the meeting? What tent of the meeting was that? The tent of the meeting was the tent that David had set up in Ir David. Yeah, so it's like the last phase. They're bringing it up now. Again, I'm skipping for today. I'm putting with a headline. The whole story about the bringing in of the Aron and the David and the Shlomo. There's a lot there. We're just not looking at it today because it's going to be front and center in Shlomo's speech. Bookmark, we have to come back to it. Pasuk Tet, Ein ba'aron, rak shnei luchot avanim asher hiniach sham Moshe b'chorev, asher karat Hashem ibnei Yisrael b'tzeitam me'eretz Mitzrayim. The only thing in the Aron, again here a lot of problems too, is just the two luchot avanim that Moshe had placed there from Chorev, which God had forged the covenant with the Jewish people when they left Egypt. Problems. What about the broken luchot? Are they not in there? What about the first Sefer Torah, the one that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote? There's a machloket in the Gemara. They use this as one of the proof texts. One opinion holds that it was a shelf built outside of the Aron Kodesh. They sort of attached it, and they had a Sefer Torah. The first Sefer Torah Moshe is sort of attached to it. It's like on the outside. The other opinion says, no, they put it in the box. There's in the Aron Kodesh as well. This pasuk indicates, no, the only thing in there was just the luchot. What about the broken luchot? Another Aron Kodesh had them? Question mark. There's a whole debate if there are two Aron Kodeshes that won't discuss more today. Bookmark. I'm aware there are issues, but I'm sliding through it because I want to show you the bookends of this parak. Vayihi, b'tzei kohanim min hakodesh, v'hanan malei et beit Hashem. The kohanim come out of the sanctuary, and the cloud of Hashem fills up the house of Hashem. V'lo yachlu hakohanim la'amod l'sharet mipnei ha'anan ki malei chivur Hashem et beit Hashem. The Kohanim could not stand to do their service on account of the cloud because the glory of Hashem had filled up the house. Just to note, small note, and it's not such a big chiddush, but there is a mention here a few times of the Kohanim, as makes sense. But the Navi goes out of its way to mention the cloud of glory is already in the house, and therefore even the Kohanim can't stand. They have to be outside, right? Pasuk Yud Bet, the section we are not reading, so of course we'll read it, just the first pasuk. Az Amar Shlomo, then Shlomo said, Hashem Amar Lishkon Ba'arafel. Shlomo opens his speech. God said to dwell in the dark cloud. The Arafel means a very dark cloud, something that's thick, something dense. We'll do one more pasuk. Bano baniti beit zvul lach. Machon l'shivtecha olamim. I have built for you a repository, a house in which you can reside, so to speak. Machon l'shivtecha, a place that you are dwelling, to be, to settle, or to live for all time. It's very hard to translate what it means. I don't know what does Koren do. Set a place for thee to abide for and forever. Okay, I'll go with Koren. Yeah, but the point is, I built this as a repository for you. Further along in the speech, which we're not learning today, Shlomo's it's more a question and a wonder than anything else. Is the heavens can't contain you, so you have a space? That's why the opening words of the speech are, God said. He wants to dwell in the Arafel, in the cloud, and I, Shlomo, have built a house for you, Hashem. It's an abode. Well, that was what I was looking for, an abode. Does that say in English too? No. For thee to abide. But the abode is what I was looking for. Beit Zvulach, Machol Neshivtecha Olamim. And then comes the speech. So the speech begins here, and it goes, and this speech will be incredibly important for us to see. It's the program. Shall I give me a minute? It's the program of what we're going to understand as the function, and what Shlomo understands the function of the Beit HaMikdash. And we know that there's a national function, there's a universal function, and it's already articulated in the, it's the programmatic inaugural dedication speech by Shlomo HaMelech. He sets the tone for the whole thing, and different times when it'll be used and why it's necessary, and also expressing that wonderment. But the heavens and the highest heavens can't contain you, Hashem, but you want a place here? Okay, that's what you want. That's what you asked. Okay, so before I get to the second half of the bookend, which is, you can flip now to verse 54, page 416 in the Koren Tanakh. It's in Melachim Alef, chapter 8, verse 54. Shelley, go ahead, unmute so you can ask or comment, please.
Okay, it's in verse 13, Olamim, when he says, Shlomo says, I have built this house for you forever. Isn't there a little bit of hubris in here? I mean, it doesn't seem to be saying forever if we do the right thing or anything like that. I mean, I think it builds into all the stuff with Paro and everything else of the rock going in, because he really thinks that somehow this is going to be the Messianic age.
Yeah, but I'm only going to part company with you in one line, the word hubris. In other words, I don't know that it's kind of a place of hubris. If you look, we saw the first mention of the notion that there's going to be a house for Hashem is in Shirat Hayam. And it sounds like there will be the ultimate deliverance when God brings us to the land that he promised us. And then there will be a house for God, a temple. Mikdash Hashem konenu yadecha. Now, we live with the hindsight, but Put yourself in their shoes. We've arrived. And almost no shiur can pass now without my mentioning Rav Meidan. So I guess I'll mention him. Why not? Just to throw it in for good measure. But we will see in the speech that there will be a very strange reality described by Shlomo HaMelech, where the Jewish people will be punished, where of those people who are punished, they will be exiled. But do you know how they'll get back? They'll pray in the direction of the Beit HaMikdash, and then Hashem will bring them back home, and they will serve again in the Beit HaMikdash. It's the Psukim 44 and onward. You can read it for yourself. I don't want to take more time on it now. I want to get to the next subject, page 44. In other words, and Rav Meidan points this out, but like, that's the genius of it. You're like, look, that's so obvious. They could not yet imagine the possibility that Hashem would bring them out of exile to the land of Israel to fulfill Jewish history, to build a Beit HaMikdash, and that after that, that house itself, the link itself, could be broken. They didn't think it was possible. It was not possible. It was the end of Jewish history. Exactly. And now I come back to what you were saying, Shelley, which is exactly that Mashiach has arrived. You know who the Mashiach is? Shlomo's the Mashiach. Wasn't he? He was anointed. Why was he anointed? Because there was a contest for the throne, but really David was anointed. Why was David anointed? It was a contest for the throne. Isn't he the chosen one, the son of David? And now when you understand that, you start realizing why it is that in the first temple period, where you have pages and pages and pages and pages of Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu, they're saying, and Yechezkel afterward, the temple is going to be destroyed. It's easy to be a false prophet. You have a lot of history on your side, and you have Shirat Hayam on your side, and you have the inaugural words of Shlomo Melech on your side, because it's inconceivable that there won't be a Beit HaMikdash. It's inconceivable. The world will be destroyed sooner. And then it happened. And then there wasn't a Beit HaMikdash. And in most cases, when the people lost their temple, Lahavdol V'Fei Avdalot, they were lost, finished, but not Klal Yisrael. We came back. And when we came back, we said, we'll never get thrown out of here again. Never. Hashem didn't bring us back from Galut and a fulfillment of all these nevuot in order to ever go back into Galut. It can't happen again. Sound familiar? And then what happened? So it gives us a flavor, and just to realize that. And I don't think it's coming from a place of hubris per se. I think Hashem, you told me to build it, and it's for all time. Mikdash Hashem korenu yadecha, Hashem yimloch leolam va'ed. Those are the words of Shirat Hayam, right? In the Song of the Sea. God, you have prepared a temple with your hands. God, may God reign forever and ever. You know why God will reign forever and ever? Because he built the temple with his hands. Because it's here. Mechol shiftecha pa'alta. Right? It says so in Mechon l'shivtecha pa'alta. It's exactly, I should have said it sooner. Mechon l'shivtecha pa'alta, an abode for your dwelling did you enact, is already in Shirat Hayam. Those exact words, and that's what's in verse 13. He's like almost quoting from Shirat Hayam, and then le'olamim, for all time, is Hashem yimloch le'olam va'ed. It's in the Song at the Sea, chapter 15 in the book of Shemot. Okay, let me move on. We have to come back to the subject again when we see the speech in depth. But since Shelley, you're amazing, in there, I had to go with it. Wait 1 second. Karen next, and then Helen after that. Go, Karen, please.
Oh, I was just going to say that the temple, the temple's for us. Hashem doesn't need a temple.
Oh.
We need the temple.
Yeah.
And then when the building is destroyed, we internalize it. We've carried it with us into Galus, and we'll carry it back.
Oh.
Again.
Yeah, very well said. But the mystery, that is all true, but we're still dealing with the theological mystery of like, so then why do we need the house altogether?
Because he is the place.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
he
fine. I mean, that's already an answer, you know? And as Larry's pointing out here, wrote in, the eternity of Hashem stands alone. It's not dependent on the temple, right? It's not dependent on the temple, correct? So look, sure, 100%. Oh, you actually wrote that in as well. I'm sorry, I didn't see that previously, Karen. Sorry.
That's okay.
That's what you wrote down. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Helen, please go ahead. Good morning, everybody. Helen, go ahead, please.
This is a bit far out. Daniel is having a very important moment that he's looking out the window toward Jerusalem. So we need him, like Nachshon ben Aminadav, to restart the point of La'olamim. Because you said La'olam Yershu, or it is one but when we say olamim, we may need successive startups. And with Daniel doing that, that was a second initial startup to fit the plural of olamim. I mean, it's pretty far out.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. יכול להיות.
Like Nachshon started us with the.
Yeah, you need like a first person who's going to push it forward. Yeah, the next step. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Inachinami.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank
I would
you.
argue that the Zionists, Lahavdil in the 19th century, the Chovevei Tzion, they started it off. Another talich, but that's a little more complicated, so I won't go down that road today. Join me, verse 54. Let's look inside 54 again. So we saw the first paragraph. It's actually, if you're looking at Koren Tanakh or in a Masoretic text, it's a paragraph break because it's like that's one section, stop. Then it comes to the speech. The speech is a bunch of different paragraphs, etc. But then finishes. Now the end. Vayhi kechalot Shlomo hitpalel Hashem. Et kol hatfilah v'hatchina zot. Kam lifnei mizbach Hashem yikra al berkav v'chapav prusot hashamayim. He finishes the speech, and then he gets up off his knees and his petition, etc. Apparently, when he was praying, not only was he on his knees, but his hands were outstretched toward heaven. We'll have to understand that. We don't do that today. Then I'm skipping. I know you'll hate me for it, but nothing we can do. Again, I'll come back to it. We're going to read that's my goal, is outside and then moving in a subsequent session. Verse 55 is the beginning of a blessing to the Jewish people. The blessing is verse 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, and that's where it ends. And when we finish there, that's where we'll see, not for today, Shlomo will engage the conditional element of you have to think about Hashem, you have to know God, he wants you to know God, you have to keep his mitzvahs, you have to, and if not, we're going to lose it. Shlomo understands that there's a conditional element, but not we're going to lose it like it's going to be broken down, but like if we lose it, we'll get punished and get exiled. The building will still be here. We'll come back to it somehow. It's an interesting idea that there could be a building standing, that people could be exiled and then come back to it after. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. Look at verse 62. That back to the active part. After the speech, now they offer offerings. We heard they gave offerings before on the way up. Now they've arrived. They're giving offerings. Sounds like it's right there at the spot. Vayizbach Shlomo. Et zevach hashlamim asher zevach laHashem. Bakar esrim ushnaim elef vitzon meya ve'esrim elef. Alef, vayachanchu et Beit Hashem hamelech v'chol bnei Yisrael. So we're talking about a very vast numbers, right? It's 22,000 bakar and son, and then bakar, and then son is 120,000 son, and the vayachanchu is, what's the word vayachanchu mean? How is another way of saying the word vayachanchu? Milashon? Dedicate, or another word, as we would say it, translated into English, Chanuka. Not really English, but you understand, right? That's what it means. The Chanuka was actually a Chanuka that transpired in the manner of giving offerings, or to say it in the parlance that we're familiar with this week. Az egmor b'shir mizmor, Chanukat hamizbeach. The Chanuka that's being referenced is the Chanuka that's relevant for us in understanding Chanukat HaBayit, dedication of the house, but the specific part of the house that inaugurates it is the offering of the offerings themselves. And it's just worthy of consideration. When you think about, like, what does it mean when we say Chanuka? We're talking about the house generally, and it's vayachnechu et Beit Hashem, right? It's the king together with the whole house of Israel, which is very very beautiful, and the way to feel about it in terms of its regal moment, but also to express the idea that in the giving of these korbanot, there seems to be some deep symbolism. Yeah, minastam. If I wanted to darshan it out, you'd say the numbers are symbolic themselves. Okay, the number 22,000, very symbolic number. The number 22 with the letters in the Alef bet. There's all sorts of drushes you could make over here. There were approximately 22,000 Levium in the count in the Midbar. 120,000 is not so hard to understand. It's 12 tribes. And the number 120,000. Something along those lines. Yeah. But I digress from the drushes of the moment. Let's look at some other themes though in the psukim. When we examine the next section, we see here that the people are engaged in this activity for the first day of it. Pasuk Samach Daled. By Yomahu Kidash Hamelach et Toche Chatzer Asher Lifnei Beit Hashem. Ki asa sham et haolah vet hamincha vet chelve hashlamim ki mizbach hanechosh asher lifnei Hashem katon me'achil et haolah vet hamincha vet chelve hashlamim. It was not possible to use the mizbach hanechoshet is a stand-in for the main altar that's in the courtyard, the chatzer outside of the Beit HaMikdash, outside of the building itself. Therefore, what did they need to do? They need to expand the number of altars. It spills out of its confines. It's in a much wider area, so they could accommodate giving so many offerings in one day. So, in other words, they had to go out not just in the area of the where the Mizbeach was. Remember, the Mizbeach is just outside of the Heichal, the sanctuary. There's two Mizbechot. Don't confuse it. There's a gold altar that's for incense offerings. That's inside the Kodesh, the Heichal. Then there's in the general area right outside called the Azara. And in the Azara, that area right outside the building, that's where the big altar was. The altar couldn't accommodate. So you know what Shlomo Melech had to do? He had to sanctify the courtyard area that was outside of the normal place where the normal manner of events transpired for the giving of offerings. Because he had to make more of it he had to be makdish more of it, right? In order to get to a point where he could accommodate the so many offerings that had to be offered. Everybody with me so far? Okay, not too complex, I suppose, but right, but just to think about. Yeah, Helen, go ahead.
Do any of the Meforshim read this in any symbolic way, not actually? Is there anybody that speaks up?
No. No. Everybody, according to what I know, I've not seen it. I don't mean anybody, nobody. I've never seen anyone who holds they didn't actually give these offerings. That's our emunah. They gave these offerings. That's what they did. They gave these offerings. They gave these offerings. But let me keep going with this. I got to finish the thought, if you don't mind, just to push this ahead, because I'm trying to make a point over here. So they had to expand outward, and he had to take the chatzer that's before the Beit Hashem, and he had to be mekadesh it, because there were so many offerings. Now, verse 65. They made Sukkot happen. It's a big group. Milavot Chamad at Nachal Mitzrayim. Milavot Chamad is all the way in the north, Nachal Mitzrayim all the way in the south. Lifnei Hashem Elokeinu, before Hashem our God. Shivat Yamim, Arba Asar Yom. It's 7 days and 7 days, a total of 14 days. But look at verse 66. By Yom HaShmini, on the 8th day, Shilach et ha'am v'yivarchu et ha'melech v'yelchu oleim smichim v'tovei leiv al kol ha'tova asher asa Hashem David avdo u'Yisrael amo. On the 8th day, there's 7 days of Sukkot, and then there's another 7 days and an 8th day. So there's 7 days of Sukkot. I'm going to say it one more time. 7 days of Sukkot, and after 7 days of Sukkot, what's the day after Sukkot called? After 7 days of Sukkot, the next day in the Torah is called? Remember, Shmini Atzeret. So Shmini Atzeret was the beginning of another 7-day period, of which an 8th day was appended. So there was Sukkot 7 days, and then another 7-day festival. But as it turned out, the second 7-day festival was actually had an 8th day, just like the regular like for us, we have 7 days Sukkot, and then we have another holiday we call Shmini Atzeret, which is both a separate holiday. We say another Shachianu, it's another holiday, and it's the 8th day of the 7-day festival. Bayom Hashmini Atzeret Yelachem. That's the Torah describes it. You with me now? Shlomo HaMelech at the Chanukat Beit HaMikdash made the 7 days of Sukkot, then he mirrored it with 7 days, and he added an 8th day. He made what amounted to an extra 8-day festival, 8 days of Chanuka following the 7 days of Sukkot. So it was 7 and then 7, but then there was an 8th day. Are you following where I'm going with this? Now look at your screen, and I'll point out something that you're saying every single day. Every time you see Birkat HaMazon, every time in the davening, right? You open up the Ala Nisim. Your children came to Dvir Beitecha. You couldn't have just said they came to the Beit HaMikdash. Oh, Davka Dvir Beitecha. Davka, they're coming to the Dvir Beitecha. You know where it said that? In the Chanukat HaBayit. And then you know what they had to do? They had to light the candles. I always thought when they lit the candles because of the menorah that's inside the sanctuary. That's not what it says in Ala Nisim. Vidliku nerot bechatzrot kodshecha, in the courtyards. Should I underline this? And bechatzrot kodshecha, in the courtyards, in your sacred courtyards. Where are the sacred courtyards? Who sanctified the courtyard? Now it's sanctified because it's already the HaBayit, the Temple Mount. It's sanctified because it's already the Beit HaMikdash. But the courtyards is not a reference to the Azara. The Azara means the area just outside of the sanctuary building. That when we say the Beit HaMikdash, the building, the temple, we mean a building, a very beautiful, ornate building. So just outside of it, right outside the door, was this massive altar. But what did Shlomo Melech have to do? Verse 64, Bayomahu, Kidash HaMelech et toch echatzer, asher lifnei Beit Hashem. Because it was a festival that was overflowing. And you know what the Chachamim did? They put the 8-day festival, and the days are called the days of Chanuka. Right? To praise you, Hashem. You understand where we're going with this? Right? Shelly, you're asking if the offerings were totally burnt up? No, if it's Shlomim, they ate part of it. If it's Shlomim, they ate part of it. So worthy of consideration. It seems like they did eat from it. But the point is, it's spilled out into the street, you could say. Huh? You understand where all these applications come up again in a holiday that we're in the midst of right now. It's not, I don't think this is a stretch. I don't think this is like some homiletic departure from the text. That's what you're saying in the Ala Nisim. It's there specifically. And the notion of the chatzrot is the courtyards of your sanctuary specifically, and that's where the lights are lit. And then the Dvir Beitecha, the reference as well, which we don't find every single time it refers to the Beit HaMikdash, neither before nor after. So after they sing these psukim, I want everybody please to help me. Turn to Divrei Yamim Bet. We'll get some exercise. Chapter 7. Divrei Yamim Bet, chapter 7. It's in the Koren Tanakh. You can find it on page 992. 992. Again, we're getting a different angle on it. I skipped out the whole speech again. It's almost the same speech, not exactly the same speech. It's pretty close. If you want to skip back, by the way, to see it inside, it's just to see the words. But we're not going to be able to see the whole thing inside. We just don't have that kind of time today. But it's almost identical. Look at in chapter 5 in Divrei Yamim Bet, chapter 5, verse 11. When they go outside, it describes that they were how the music and everybody's how they're dressed and they're all playing instruments. There's a whole orchestra going. Again, it's page 989, Koren Tanakh at the bottom of the page. Again, or alternatively, Divrei Yamim Bet, Chronicles 2, chapter 5, verse 11 and onward. It describes very beautifully the mellifluous sounds of the orchestra, etc., and the singers and everybody, and they're singing all together. Right? I probably should have put this in also. Sorry. You know what? We should scratch that. We should read this. Everybody look, verse 13, right? I didn't even notice this before. Vayhi ke'echad machzirim, lamchatzrim, sorry, v'lamishorim. So the people who are playing the chatzotzrot, the people who are singing the songs. Lashmiya kol echad lehalel ulohodot. Sounds very much like lahodot ulahalel, doesn't it? Lahal hodot, lahol. I didn't even know this. I didn't realize it before. So here, as in Midia Reyes, I just figured it out another thing. Lahodot lahalel, lahalel lahodot. It's pretty darn close. And you don't find it elsewhere in Tanakh, as far as I know. I haven't learned the whole Tanakh by heart, but uvahalel Hashem. Kitov kilam chazdov abayit maleh anan beit Hashem. They're singing a hallel for Hashem. Kitov kilam chazdov. What are we doing, Chanuka? Singing a hallel for Hashem. Amazing. Okay, and the house is filled with the cloud. Bayit Sheni, second temple period, no cloud. Okay. They couldn't stand there. There's too much going on. Chapter 6, verse 1. Az Amar Shlomo, Hashem Amar Lishkon Barafel, Bani Baniti Beit Zvulach, Umechol Shiftecha, Olamim. Exactly the words from chapter 8 in Kings, in 1 Kings. And then is the speech. Skip the whole speech. Skip the speech. We just don't have time now. Turn to chapter 7. Chapter 7, verse 1. After you finish davening. Then happen in chapter in the second temple period. First temple period, fire comes from heaven. Glory of God, fill the house of God. Vayichru apayim arza al ritzpa vayishtachavu v'hodot la'Hashem kitov kilolam chazdo. Again, I'll bow down, and it's the prayer of hoda'ah, thanksgiving to Hashem, for He is good, for His kindness endures forever. The signature line of Hallel, hodot Hashem kitov chazdo, and its other iterations right here. And I'll point out, in case it wasn't already incredibly apparent, in the first temple period, like in the Mishkan, the fire comes from heaven. In the second temple period, particularly the holiday of Chanuka, is typified by the menorah, which is about the people lighting the fire for the sake of Hashem. Fire comes from heaven. The Hasidim would say, Itaruta de la'ela, an arousal from above, an awakening from above. It comes down to the people. Bayit Sheni, we have to light the lights. Hashem's still with us, but not in his overt way. We have to do it. Verse 4, Vayizbach HaMelech Shlomo, et Zevach HaBakar, Esrim U'Shnaim Alef, 22,000 again, same number. Vitzon Me'ev Esrim Alef, didn't change, 120,000 sheep. Vayachnechu at Beit HaElokim, HaMelech V'chol Ha'am. V'akonim, Al Mishmerotam, Omdim, V'alavim B'chlei Shir Hashem, Asher Asa David HaMelech, Lodot LaHashem, Ki Leolam Chazdo, B'Halel, David B'Adam, V'akohanim, Machzirim Negdam, Chol Yisrael Omdim. Larry's on the call. We learn together Monday nights. We learn Gemara Sukkah. We're actually studying now about Hallel. And I'll just put a little bookmark here from the Talmud class. Already at the Chanukat HaBayit of Bayit Rishon, right here. It's the Hallel of David. It's written right here that was the Hallel they sang. Like people want to know, like today, how come our Hallel is Hallel? Maybe our Hallel should be reading the Shirat Hayam. Because at the time that the Beit HaMikdash was built, the song that was sung is the Hallel. It says so right here. It describes the Hallel David Biyadam. Right? They're holding on to the Hallel of David. Where's that? We said it this morning. We're saying it every one of the 8 days of the holiday of Chanuka. Right? So everyone's standing and they're here. Yeah. Okay. So that's just something to consider. If you keep going, it's going to talk again about the 7 and the 8 is the next section. We don't have time to see it. I want to look at a few sources inside to try to fill out this picture. We'll see how far we can get. So, before we get to seeing more sources, we got to look up Bamidbar chapter 7. I made a note to myself. Go to Bamidbar chapter 7. Every single day now in Shul, all 8 days of the holiday of Chanuka, we're reading the section from the 12 tribes princes bringing gifts at the Chanukat HaMizbeach and the Chanukat HaMishkan in the time of the Torah. So I'm on page 165 in my Koren Tanakh. If you don't have that version, fret not. It's Bamidbar chapter 7, right from the beginning. We won't be able to see every single verse here, but Vayihi b'yom kalot Moshe lakim mishkan, vayimshach oto, vayakadesh oto, v'kol kelav v'mizbeach v'kol kelav vayimshachem v'kadesh otam. He's using the oil to anoint it with in order to make all of these things become sanctified and designated for use by Kohanim in the service of Hashem. By Akrivu Nesiei Yisrael Shebeit Avotam Hem Nesiei Amatot Hem Omdim Al Pkudim Vayaviu Et Korbanim Lifnei Hashem Shisha Glotzav Ushnei Asar Bakar Agala Al Shnei Anesiim V'Shor LeEchad Vayakrivu Otam Lifnei Mishkan. So they bring their offering. Their offering here is not an offering that we think of as an offering. I should read a little farther. It's not an offering on the Mizbeach. Vayomer Hashem El Moshe Lemor. God says to Moshe in the middle of this, while they're bringing these gifts with these covered wagons, they're being pulled by oxen. God says to him, verse 5, Kach me'itam, take it from them. Take it from them, and they'll serve in the avodat ol moed, tent of the meeting, and you give them to the Levim, i.e. is for the transport. Vayikach Moshe hagalot v'rabakar v'yitim otam Levim, et shtei hagalot v'et arbat habakar natan livnei Gershon k'fi adodatam, v'et arba hagalot v'et shmona habakar natan livnei Merari. So it's 2 oxen pulling each wagon, right? Therefore, it's double the number, and giving it out to different families. K'fi adodatam b'yad Tamar ben Aaron HaKohen. V'bnei Kat lo natan. The Bnei Kat don't get any of these wagons. Ki avodat hakodesh aleim b'katef Yisrael. They have to carry those vessels, the holiest of the vessels, the components from the Mishkan, on their shoulders. The Nesiim offered the Chanuka, Chanukat HaMizbeach, highlight those words. Chanuka is Chanukat HaMizbeach, on the day that it was anointed with oil. And they brought their korbanot closer. And God tells Moshe, every one of them will bring their offering for the Chanuka, the first holiday of Chanuka, the Chanuka of the Mizbeach. And then we have the section of each of the princes. Each prince brings something on its day. 12 princes, so of course we run out of days. We have 8 days Chanuka, and on day 8, we read the Korban from, next page, sorry, from the Korban, for the Korban of the Nasi of Menashe, page, it's a Pasuk 54, it's Bamidbar chapter 7, 54, because every day we read 1. So we get to day 8, we read for 8, 9, 10, flip the page, 11, 12. You're looking in a Koren Tanakh or similar Tanakh with the paragraphing. You see they're each by themselves. And on that 8th day, we read through to the 12th. And on the 8th day, verse 84, the summary, Zot Chanukat HaMizbeach b'mishachoto, Meit Nisei Yisrael, and it gives you the whole list of what people brought, and now it's like a tally of what they brought and how much there was, right? And how they brought them. Verse 87, the bakar for Ola was 12 parim, elim, the 12 rams, and 12 kvasim. And then the mincha offerings that were brought, and the sirei izim that were 12 of those as well. And then the list about the total, and then the last pasuk, verse 89. Uvevo Moshe al ol moed leberi tov vayishma kol midaberi lav me'al kaporet asher al aron ha'idut miben shnei kruvim vayidaberi lav. So Moshe hears the voice of God between the kruvim, and he speaks to him. What does he say to him? Maybe the next section makes the most sense, but not necessarily. But okay, but that's how the Torah organizes it. It's the next section. And on the 8th day of Chanukah, as Paul Harvey once said in another context, and on the 8th day, look at chapter 8. It's the next section. We read it on the 8th day of Chanukah, and we know why. Vayedaber Hashem Moshe lemor, daber al Aaron v'amarta elav b'halotcha hanerot, and mul pnei hamnorah yiru shivat hanerot. Speak to Aaron and tell him, when you cause the flame to go up of the lamps, the 7 candles will all shine toward the middle. That's one of the interpretations. And it reminds us of how the menorah looked. Miksha zahav was made of one piece of gold, hammered out. Ad yerechad pircha, from the foot of it till its flowers, ornate flowers that were made. Mikshahi kamar el Hashem et Moshe kenasad hamnora, like the vision that was shown, that God showed to Moshe. That's how he made the menorah. Where did he show him the vision? On Har Sinai. So it's connecting us here at the day of Hakamat HaMishkan and Chanukat HaMizbeach to Har Sinai. And what's the vision that we're left with? And that's where we end. On the 8th day of Chanukah, we read till there. And we call this section Zot Chanukah, because the verse 84 begins Zot Chanukat HaMizbeach. Okay, so we saw this section, and now we see, we hear some parallels, right? Some things going on. The Medrash describes, look with me here, that there were Vayakrivu, Otam Lifnei Mishkan, Melamed Shevimu Masrim Latzibur, Bo Va'amdu Lifnei Mishkan, V'lo Kibel Mehem. Originally, when they brought these things near the Mishkan, if you look back, when the original gifts were being brought, the gifts themselves were the first of all, the oxen pulling these covered wagons that's the princes brought. And then it describes verse, hold on, I don't want to get the wrong pasuk. Verse 3. It says they brought their offerings before God, and then it goes back to the korban. Sounds like it's a korban, like an offering, no? Like the offerings that are going to be slaughtered and put on the altar. But they brought their offerings before God. Then it tells you it's 6 covered wagons. Then it's 12 oxen. Okay? And then it's going to be 1 wagon per nasi. And then you have the oxen. They brought them next to the Mishkan. Then comes the interruption of Hashem speaking to Moshe and saying, take it from them. So the Medrash fills in that when they brought it, Moshe said, I'm sorry, you cannot admit this. I wasn't giving it an instruction. You can't take this initiative. So he waited. He kept it there. And that's why Hashem speaks to him. Take it from them. Right? God said to Moshe, take it from them. They took initiative, and I accept their initiative. Mau lemor, but why say lemor? Vayomer Hashem el Moshe lemor. Lemor means to say it to them. To say what to them? To say to them, take from them? No, Hashem's just telling Moshe, you could take it. So Tani Rabbi Hoshaya, Amar Lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe, Seve Amor Lahem Divrei Kvushim, Divrei Nechamot, Kach Me'itam. Go outside and speak to them words of rebuke and words of consolation, both, and take it from them. Moshe was anxious. He said, they'll say that Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, has left me, and now it's on the Nesiim. Moshe's worried about his job. Strange. But he's worried maybe that they took an initiative. He wasn't even aware of it. And they showed up. Maybe he's not in God's good graces anymore. Instead, the Nesiim are taking over. Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, Ilu lahem hayiti omer, she'aviu lecha, hayiti omer, she'tomar lahem. Ela kach me'itam haya adavar, ha'iskima daitam ladat elyona. In other words, if I had told them to bring it to you, that would be one thing. But kach me'itam means it was their initiative, and it wasn't with Ruach HaKodesh that they took this initiative. Let me repeat that. People who wanted to get closer to Hashem took initiative that was not because they heard Ruach HaKodesh, because they realized that it takes some initiative, and therefore they had to bring a gift to Hashem. Their da'at, their intellect, their understanding agreed with the mind, so to speak, or the intellect, if you will. It's probably the wrong word, but the knowledge that is on high. That's, Hashem says, it's good. They took this initiative. It's good, this initiative. I like this initiative, even though I'm telling you right now, there was no Ruach HaKodesh in it. We read this the first day of Chanuka. Is it only because it was Chanukat HaMizbeach? Was there also an element here of Chachamim, who no longer have access to Ruach HaKodesh, but who realize maybe we have to take some initiative? Shelly, give me a minute to finish this source. Moshe Tomar Shema Achim Nagalot Nishbra, Achim Nashvar Mate, Venimtze Korban Shel Nesim Puzzle. Yeah, well, maybe one of them, something's wrong with one of the wagons, or maybe one of the oxen is going to die, and the Korban and the Nesim will be puzzle. So Hashem says, don't worry. Vayula avodat avodat ol moed nitan lehem havaya shiu kayamim laolam. This is a very strange pasuk, a very strange line in the Medrash, and I'll leave it to you if you want to take it literally or not. Again, see two perfect Jews, one who takes this literally, one who sees it more in symbolic terms. God said to Moshe, don't worry, I'm going to make these oxen and these wagons, they're going to last forever. So the Medrash itself asks, Ad hey Chanuka, until when were these oxen still alive? Like, till when? Till when? Rav Yehuda b'Shem Rav Shimon bar Nachman Rav Mechunya b'Shem bar Kapar Amar Ad shebegilgal shvarim zavchu. At the time of Gilgal, when the Jewish people come to Eretz Yisrael, later, then they slaughtered these oxen and they offered them. First, they were pulling the wagons. They didn't have to pull the wagons anymore because they had arrived in Eretz Yisrael. Little did they know they weren't going to stay in Gilgal, right? So that's why later on they don't have oxen and they don't have to pull the actual oxen. Now that's not a big stretch. That's like 40 years later. Okay, maybe. When were they offered as offerings? So Rabbi Abba bar Abba says it was in Nov that they were offered. Rabbi Abahu Amar beGivon hikrivum. It was in Givon later. Rabbi Chama bar Chanina Amar beVeit Olamim hikrivum. He thinks that they were given when? In the Beit HaMikdash. Amar Rabbi Levi, Ta'amed Rabbi Chama bar Chanina. Actually, that's the one that makes the most sense. You know why? By Yizbach, Shlomo et Zavach v'chulei. Right? If you look up the pasuk in Melachim Alef, Perek Chet, Take, he offered bakar, and it says so. Must be that in that bakar was what? Were these 12 from the time of Moshe? Tana b'Shem Rabbi Meir. Ad achshav hin hagalot v'aparot kayamot. Don't worry, they learned the name of Rabbi Meir. Until today, those wagons and those oxen are still alive. V'lo humumu, v'lo hiskinu, v'lo hitrifu. Nothing bad happened. V'lo nishbaru. The wagons aren't broken. The oxen aren't broken. The oxen don't have any mumim. They're living till today. They're living till today. I mean, really? V'lo dvarim kal v'chomer. If those oxen and that which was no more than the transport vehicle of the Mishkan, they live forever. Yisrael, shehem devukim, v'akadosh baruch hu achad kama v'kama. All the more so, the Jewish people who cleave to God live forever. Shenamar, v'tamvekim Hashem lokechem chaim kul chameyom. Fine. You know, they give a number of oxen according to the amount of work. Shelly, I didn't forget you. Give me one more second to finish this thought. Again, you want to take it literally? You take it literally. What's the point? The point is that Jewish history is going to come full circle. When did it come full circle? At some point, even that which was offered and brought closer that had a function, and the function was finished because they arrived in the land of Israel, still had a function. It was offered as offerings. And if you look at the verses, the hint in the verses is verse 3, they brought their korban lifnei Hashem. What's the korban? A korban means to get close, the karev. What's the korban? They brought their korban before God. It's the wagons and it's the oxen that go with it. And they put it near the Mishkan. Then verse 4 and verse 5, and Hashem tells Moshe, accept. Verse 6 and verse 7, he accepts and gives out 9, sorry. And then verse 10, look what it says at verse 10. When they brought their korban before the mizbech, then Hashem said, okay, now they're going to be korbanot. So the word korban means something getting closer, and on a certain level, again, it's midrashic, understand, these wagons and these oxen, they're going to have a purpose in the future. So Rabbi Meir, right, such as he was, living in the Second Temple period, a very challenging time, wants to tell the people, don't worry, they're still alive, those oxen. God said they're going to still be alive. You know what? We're alive too. We who have burdens that we bear, that we carry, we're carrying Jewish history, whatever you want to put the homiletics in, but that's the nekudah. There's a coming full circle, and therefore Shlomo in the Beit Olamim, that is going to be bringing Jewish history full circle. And that's why you have Rabbi Levi saying, Rabbi Chanukat said, that actually is mashma from the psukim themselves. By the way, I think the Matnot Kehuna, one of the commentators, points out that in the Divrei Hayamim edition of this story, it uses the very strange formula, not strange, I mean, maybe it's too much of an exaggeration. In chapter 7, I already turned it off, but over here, the page, chapter 7, verse, to find the exact pasuk, it says they gave the offerings, and it uses chapter 7. At one point, it calls it, instead of bakar, it calls it habakar. So with a demonstrative letter hey, which implies that it's something that was known, that was like a known entity, the bakar. Yeah, verse 4, chapter 7, verse 4. Vayizbach hamelech Shlomo et zevach habakar. So it's the oxen. But of course, it doesn't exactly fix this Esrim Ushnaim Alef. It's 22,000 of them. So the 12 have children. I don't know. Midrashim. But the point, the Nakuda, I hope you take from here, number one, the initiative of the people. The initiative of the people. Chanuka is all about the initiative of Chazal, number one, even without Ruach HaKodesh. Number two, the idea that the gifts that are being brought at the Chanukat HaBayit, Bayit Rishon, is somewhat connected back to the Mishkan. Not only because it's the same Aron Kodesh, but also even like down to the Korbanot, maybe, bring it full circle. It wasn't for naught that they brought it just for the sake of transportation, and then they put it on the side. Yeah. Okay, Shelley, sorry, I kept you waiting way too long. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, the question is initiative, and we have dealt with this on the Monday class too. Should Avram taken the initiative and during a famine when he just come to the land to go down in, to go to eat? So the thing is always, how much do we do without God telling us to do it? And it's just very, very hard. And if you want to look at it, the Chanuka story, Matis Yahu and his sons took the initiative to fight on Shabbat when other Jews allowed themselves to be killed by the Greeks rather than fight and desecrate Shabbat. So all I'm saying is that I don't understand. I would like a rule book. When do we use initiative and when do we wait for God to tell us what to do? Because it is so confusing.
Your question is my question, and I will suggest this question is being worked out and has not yet been worked out ad hayom hazeh. If I can, I don't have to, it's not a stretch for me. Let me put on my Dati Le'umi Zionisher hat, my Zionist hat. Isn't that the whole debate about the Hakamat Medinat Yisrael from a religious perspective? Like, are we going to wait for Mashiach to come and then we're going to say we could have a state? Or we're going to say, if God gave us the opportunity to try to make a state with all of its warts and all of its foibles and its challenges, we're going to do it. That's what Hashem wants. He wants us to try. This is the debate in the Olam HaTorah, Ad Hayom Hazeh. In the more radical iterations, contra, Chalila, it's against the Torah to do this thing. You have to wait for Hashem to call you, and the Mashiach is going to blow the Sefer. Yeah, and the other side says, yeah, we want Mashiach Tzidkenu to arrive, but there's messages here about Nachshon ben Nadav and about Chanuka. That's why I think it's a big Zionisher holiday. Actually, it's a very big Zioni holiday for that reason. Again, with a cautionary tale written in on the bottom line, like maybe shouldn't be in the footnote, but in the end, the house of the Hasmoneans, after they succeeded, it didn't go so well. The Rambam says, okay, you celebrate anyway, because it was 200 years of independence of the Beit Hashmonai. But we know, unfortunately, it's very sad how it ended. It went badly. Cautionary tale. Does it mean you don't try? Shelley, your question is exactly the question Jewish history has not yet answered. And for most of Jewish history, when there was no option, the answer was very simple. Shem, we have no moves. So Hashem, whatever you'll do, we'll accept. But Bisman Hazeh, we still say, Hashem, whatever you're going to do, we accept. But you want us to be your partner a little bit to try to do things in the world, no? So you want to, okay, so if there's a movement moving forward, and the people who are running it are not religious, the anti-religious, this is another part of the debate. Maybe we shouldn't partner with such people. Maybe, they betray our basic principles of Shabbat in radical iterations of belief in Hashem. They're ethical, but there's some ethical people that's lovely, but they don't share our values, and they want to take us and make us them. We're not going to partner with them. Isn't that a lot of the yeshiva shivel? I'm simplifying, but that's just, yeah. And again, in the Tilumi world, it's not like that. They say, well, okay, they're not religious, but we are, so we're going to do our thing. They're going to do their thing. Maybe we'll be makar of them. The Olam HaCharedi says, you're makar of them, they're makar of you to their way. They're not so religious anymore. So back and forth it goes. The Tilumi world says no. So that every society has its people who are not so connected. We're also stuck that way. What can we do? But the enterprise is not worthwhile. Of course it's worthwhile. And this is the message. It's on and on and on. And we have not answered this question. We've simply not answered this question. And you'll find fine Jews in the Olam HaTorah who are all debating it. Wait, Helen, Debbie had her hand up. Let me give her the floor first, and then we'll come back to you, Helen. Debbie, please, go ahead.
So I'm going to take a stab at answering Shelley's question, if it's okay, Rabbi.
Please.
I feel that the faith, there is no quote unquote rule book in Judaism, and Hashem set that up purposely, which is why he gave us free will. And our faith is in Hashem, is what many times determines, I don't want to call them rules, they're more decisions that we make throughout life. And you could look, Rabbi Berkowitz's book, Faith After the Holocaust, is a good example. He, at the very, it's the first chapter, he says, people asked, where is God? My question is, where was man?
Yeah.
So, I, so I don't know if it's because I'm so, rooted in the Holocaust history and Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik and everything that goes with that. But anyway, that's my stab at answering Shelley's question.
Listen.
And for me, I'm grateful that there is no rule book. I want to
you want to have that freedom to figure it out. Okay, very good. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that, Debbie. Thank you. Shakar. Helen, do you still want to say something, or can I say, go ahead, Helen, please. Thank you.
Okay. This question arises with Yosef. Vayima'ain, that he took the initiative. Some Mepharshim say that he saw Yaakov, and Yaakov told him, don't do this. So that question of free initiative starting from when the person is already under question with Yosef. And then my second thing is, we are prescribed on Shabbos, I read, Shnei Kavasim B'nei Shana. On Shlosh Regolim, what is it, 15? I forgot how many.
It's more. It's more. Yeah, let's say it's more. Yeah.
Okay. But this is all definitely prescribed. The amount is set in stone. Now, why is Shlomo going out of that prescribed recipe and doing 122,000?
It's okay. So good question. Your first question, which I think was more of a comment than a question, is exactly why we're reading the story of Yosef at the time of Chanuka. It's one of the reasons Yosef doesn't ever have the dreams that Yaakov has, where God is on the top of a ladder, appearing to him, and there are angels up and down. He doesn't have the great prophetic moments of Avraham and Yitzchak. He doesn't have that. His dreams are much murkier, and they're somehow about him without Hashem appearing in the dreams. In either case, in any of the cases, and yet obviously Hashem, Kilokim Pitronim, the solutions are all from Hashem, right? But he's the one who's to use his intellect, the da'at of Yosef. So for sure. And just to correct a little piece there, the Gemara in Sota says not that Yaakov appeared to Yosef and spoke to him, but that Yosef looked at the window and saw his father's reflection in the window. He saw the image of his father in the window. That's what happened. Now the other piece, so that's just to clarify that. But the second piece that you're pointing out is a very good question about, so how much initiative and what degree of initiative are we talking about? And why did Shlomo, do more and so much more? There's a debate between the Rambam and the Ramban. And this is actually the closing of our shir today. So this is good. It dovetailed nicely. the Rambam and the Ramban debate about whether or not the notion of Chanukat Mizbech is lidorot. The Rambam thinks it's not. The Ramban thinks it is. And the Ramban's proof is the section that we're reading here, and then what Shlomo Melech did afterward. In other words, that every time there's going to be an inauguration of the temple, have to be many offerings offered. Karen, I feel like your hand is up, but it's not. Yeah, go.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, unmuted. Just when I heard the word dreamers, I just wanted to throw something in that I've been thinking of. You have Yosef, who had 2 related dreams. You had Paro, who had 2 related dreams.
Yeah.
And then you have, which Psalm is it? 126, where when we have the Galus, the ingathering. All of these have to do with the dreams when you're in Galus, you dream of being back again and being redeemed.
Right.
When you're redeemed, the galus is the dream. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Very nice. I love it.
so there's all of these things are tied together.
Right.
Dreams in
Right.
Judaism have to do with redemption.
Right. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
If you have some time, I don't know if anyone has time between now and Shabbat, but apparently there's somewhere out there, maybe it's a video, Rabbi David Foreman Shlita. I didn't see it myself. Someone told me about it, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. That Rabbi David Foreman Shalita, we were zocheh having our shul many times. Should have him again this year, God willing, February, as we usually do. Wants to read the whole chapter 126. When God brought us back, we were as dreamers. That the whole chapter is actually about Yosef and his brothers and the return from exile, and they're carrying the sheaves of wheat from the dream. And there are many literary parallels. I didn't hear the shir, but something for consideration. Let me finish the shir now because we're out of time. So of course I put a lot of text on the board. And you're like, oh my goodness, that's the end of the shir. Way too long. We have no time to read all this. I want to show you 3 sentences in the Ramban. 3 sentences. So first, the idea here is he explains in depth why did the Torah have to give us in longhand 12 paragraphs where actually the gift of each person was exactly the same. So he writes that another one of the reasons for the Midrashim, for each of the Nesiim, they thought, Allah b'machshava lahavi Chanuka mizbech shibazeh ashir. They all had their own independent thought of what they wanted to bring. But the idea is that they ended up bringing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all thinking independently, but they're all thinking along the same lines. They all have dreams, but it's the same dream, so to speak. Number 1. Number 2, the Medrash describes, and the Ramban is playing with it. It's this, it's that. Or there's a Medrash in Bamidbar Rabbah, which he gives us a longhand. There's a Masoret from Yaakov Avinu. In each and every tribe had a tradition from Yaakov about what would happen to them until Yemot HaMashiach. They had a Masoret in their hands about what it would be. And so each tribe, based on what their role was in the Jewish people, brought the exact same gift as everybody else. But when they brought the gift, they had a different kavanah, a different sense of direction, focus, mindfulness about what the symbolism of each and every element might be. So Yehuda is about Malchut. Rashi quotes this in shorthand, but I wanted to show you this. There's a Masoret from Yaakov Avinu. Mashiach, when Mashiach comes, what it's going to be. Yeah. So each tribe has its section. I'm skipping. But he says, I think, this is to Helen's question from before, that really this is the mitzvah for all generations, that whenever there's a Beit HaMikdash and there's going to have to be a Mizbech, there's going to have to be a Chanuka, and the Chanuka involves bringing offerings. Therefore, Shlomo made a Chanukat HaBayit. He had to do a Chanukat HaBayit, as the pasuk says. He made a Chanuka, and so did Anshe Knesset Agdola make Chanuka, not the Chanuka you think of. The Chanuka in the days of Ezra, when the Jewish people come back, they make a Chanukat Beit Eloha, Chanuka of the house of God. Here was the Chanuka of the house of God over here, right? And so will be, the Ramban skips, so will be the days of Mashiach. When the third Beit HaMikdash is rebuilt, there's also going to be a Chanuka. He skipped one, didn't he skip one? He skipped one. He didn't mention Chanuka, our Chanuka. We're waiting for him to say, he didn't say. Skip. Yeah, where is it? Where is it? The Ramban points out the last line. And this mitzvah here is like the matter of the Parsha Tmeim and Pesach, where the people came and say, why should we be left out of the mitzvah of Korban Pesach? Remember, Pesach Sheni comes up as a result. Or the story that Bnei Yosef means Benot Slavcha come forward. Why should we lose out on having a chelik in Eretz Yisrael? that God agreed with their thought about their initiative of what they wanted to do, and therefore they're commanded for all generations. Now come to the end of Parshat Naso. You open up the next parsha, which we read on the 8th day of Chanuka. The beginning of Parshat Balotcha is not a pertinence that's tacked on to the end of Parshat Naso. It's a direct flow. Says the Ramban. Everybody knows this line. Why is there a whole tzimis that Aaron says, I was left out, and God says, don't worry, yours is greater than theirs? Why didn't God pick korbanot? The princes each give a korban once. Aaron, you're going to give a korban every day, a korban tummy twice a day. No, instead God told him, Moshe, go tell Aaron you're going to light the lights all the time. What does it mean you're going to light the lights all the time? Oh, in haggadah hazu lidrosh remez mina parsha al Chanuka shel neirot shahayte b'bayit sheni ayedei Aaron uvanav rutzoni lomar chashmonai kohen gadol uvanav. This section is placed here right after the story of Chanukat HaMizbeach, because in between the Chanuka of Mishkan, Mikdash, and the Chanuka of Yemot HaMashiach, there'll be another Chanuka. And that Chanuka will be typified by the lighting of candles. And the lighting of candles in the Second Temple period, the lighting of candles from the house of the Chashmonaim. And that's our Chanuka. Even though we're singing about Chanukat HaMizbeach, the reality is that we're still speaking about the specificity of this holiday is centered around that which we can do even without a Beit HaMikdash in our own home, which is to light the lights, as the house of Chashmonai lit the lights. And where did they light it? B'chatzot kodshecha, right? They came to Dvir Beitech. We haven't really done that yet, so to speak, but we have the Chatzot Kodshecha. And we think about this idea. I think it gives a very powerful window, if I could use that expression advisedly, the window of Hanukkah, to look and to see the lights shining, the lights that we're lighting as part of that continuity as well. And something about the initiative of Chazal and the whole idea. If someone says to you, Hanukkah is made up, the answer is, yeah, it's made up. Chazal made it up. There's no prophet that told them, Hashem wants you to do this. They made it up. That's the koach of the Chachamim. The Heichan Sivanu asked the Gemara Masechet Shabbat, where did God command you? Oh, the pasuk in Parshat Shoftim, Lo Tasur, don't stray from the words of the Chachamim. And that's what the Chachamim did for us. They were mataking this holiday for us. Asher Kishon was Tavat Sivan Lahadlik Ner Shel Chanukah. We should be zochim to continue to light those lights, and God willing, we'll be zochim to see the lights being lit in Dvir Beitecha b'mehera b'yameinu, amen v'amen. Ad kan for today.